Hello, welcome to today's broadcast. I'm Davina. Davcat43 is my social media handle, and I'm here to talk about the Trump arraignment day. Happy Trump arraignment day, everyone. I'm not going to lean into what I've seen the news networks doing, saying it's sad. It's not sad. This is not or should not be a revelation to people that the former president was a despotically, criminally minded, out for himself, charlatan, willing and ready to throw everyone else in the bus. It was sad during COVID when he sacrificed hundreds of thousands of American lives on the altar of his re-election prospects by making false representations about a pandemic in which, as I've already said, hundreds of thousands of people died, but it's been calculated by, admittedly researchers speculating using the factors available to them, that if America's death rate had been more equal, parallel to the death rate of other countries, then literally hundreds of thousands of American lives would have been saved. And that's on Donald Trump and his desire to maximize his 2020 election chances by falsely characterizing doctors, researchers, Democrats as being people who falsely hyped up the disease. SARS-CoV-2. COVID is a disease that has taken a lot of people's lives, but public health requires a degree of consensus from public figures for people to be able to take on board the nature of an invisible threat, to be able to engage together in the level of collective action that's needed to protect each other, as well as take individual steps to protect your own health, such as masking, social distancing, not going to church, for example, or singing in a church choir. And Trump gave permission to his base to do those activities purely to foster contrarian thinking amongst his followers and amongst people who were potentially Trump voters, so that they would believe that the Democrats were falsely trying to oppress them and exert tyranny over them and lock them down for no good reason, just to throw their weight around. Whereas in actuality, it was Donald Trump making false representations, endangering people's lives, undermining the consensus that's needed to keep people safe. And the fallout is still being felt today because the Biden administration has done what it could, given the low level of public buy-in, or the relatively fragmented level of public buy-in to the idea that COVID requires group action and mass participation in safety strategies or harm minimization strategies. So today we have Donald Trump arraigned in Miami. It wasn't Judge Eileen Cannon supervising the arraignment. It was a judge who, let's look it up, who said that Trump should not speak to witnesses, which might be a little awkward. Oh, look, Trump. So I'm just looking at a point made by Jen Psaki. Trump was not charged in relation to any of the 197 documents that he returned to the archives. He was just charged for the documents that he concealed, that he willfully, knowingly, purposefully concealed from officials and even from his own lawyers. Now, this is Trump being treated with kid gloves to a degree, because of the virtue of his position as a former president. Some of those documents he stole, because they're not just documents that you can take home to your quarters in the White House at nighttime for reading. There's top secret documents that you would have only been allowed to view in a secured compartment. So that dude set out to steal those documents. It wasn't careless packing by his staff at the end of his term as president. That was anytime he got his hands on a piece of top secret information about America's nuclear capabilities, about other nations' nuclear and defense capabilities, that dude squirreled it away. And that's one of my hopes about this current situation of his arraignment and the speaking narrative put forward by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, is that people can see those pictures for themselves, and they resonate with people, even people who are not yet ready to admit to themselves that former President Donald Trump is hell-bent on criminally exploiting his position when he was president and even after he left office. That there'll be some kind of visceral recognition of that behavior, which is that man is a hoarder. That man is a hoarder, and it doesn't matter how much people around him said it's endangering. I mean, imagine you've had a relative who's hoarded and you've told them it's endangering your health. It's endangering the relative of any dependents you have living with you. It's endangering the health of your pets, and you're endangering your own health. It is hard to break through to a hoarder. It is hard to break through to somebody who is hell-bent on scratching whatever psychological itches they have by acquiring things of personal significance to them. And for Donald Trump, America's defense documents were of personal significance to him. America's national defense secrets were of personal significance to him because it meant he had access to power. So he could continue, even having left office, to exploit that past access to power by preserving it. Because being able to view your own little private collection of top secret and all subheadings of classified documents whenever you want, in your bathroom, in your desk drawer, going to visit the ballroom stage, going to visit your own bedroom where you've got boxes stacked in the corner. This is all power. This is access to power, illicit, illegal, contrary to national interests, power. So the reason why I have Mitch McConnell up there is not related to today's arraignment. It's for anybody who needs a breath of fresh air of a Republican speaking honestly about Donald Trump's role in endangering American national security. Because I have a little speech lined up to play in which Mitch McConnell calls out Donald Trump for his role in January the 6th, when he incited a mob of riled up Donald Trump supporters to attack the government in an effort to overthrow the system of democracy, to overthrow the transition of power, to be part of a cog in the process of an insurrection, a process of delaying Joe Biden's certification of his electoral college win and his presidential election win, for the purpose of challenging it and giving time for the other components of Donald Trump's schemes to come to fruition, namely the evoking of a section of the 12th Amendment that says if the outcome of the election is disputed, if there's a tie, if the results aren't clear, then a second form of election can be held with one representative from each state in the House of Representatives voting on who they would like to be president, in which case the Republicans had 26 states represented. If you're only going one person per state, they had the majority in that framework, and they would have, in all probability, been able to choose Donald Trump, or Donald Trump would have made every effort to pressure all of those 26 representatives to cause him to be falsely re-elected, even though Joe Biden won not only the popular vote, but the critical electoral college vote, which in America is a vestigial symptom of slavery because it was part of the Constitution, included for the purposes of preserving slavery. The electoral college system is a way of weighting states to just give a little bit of extra heft to the votes of rural American voters who live in more sparsely populated states. It's falsely sold to the American people as being a helping hand for the little guy. But when they say little guy, they mean states. States are not in themselves little guys, but lower density populated states. What they are is states with lower population density, higher high proportion of agricultural industry, i.e. states where there used to be lots of farms populated by enslaved people who did the work of generating profit for America with no recompense and an immoral loss of personal freedom, liberty, and the ability to pursue happiness or family intactness or anything like that. So the Electoral College is a thumb on the scale in the United States for conservative rural voters, a leftover, a vestigial element relating to that desire to make a conciliatory gesture to wealthy, influential slave owners, landowners, to say, don't worry, you needn't worry that those industrialized areas of America will end up outlawing slavery and depriving you of that source of extreme profitability for you. You will have this ability to exert political power over and above the number of actual voters that you have in your state, because you will be assigned a number to count in this electoral college system. It's our way of muddying the waters to conceal that you will have this advantage. You will be able to balance against the weight of industrial area voters who aren't dependent on agricultural income. You will be able to counter their influence and preserve slavery, or preserve factors that will still privilege your descendants and the inheritors of that wealth derived from slavery. Don't worry, we'll make sure we have enough rural conservative voters to keep any political party out of office that even starts talking about recompense for slaves, former slaves, or their descendants. Basically, it's an anti-reparations, an ongoing anti-reparations element of the United States Constitution. I hope that makes sense. It should do. If you're following along, if you're familiar with the Electoral College system, if you're familiar with the basics of the American Constitution. Now, let's listen to Mitch condemn Donald Trump of his own free will before it became evident to him that Donald Trump's supporters were sufficiently attached to their white supremacy champion that they were unable to let go of him, even in the face of extraordinary evidence that he incited a riot, he incited an attack on the Capitol as part of a scheme to overthrow American democracy and reinstall himself as an unelected dictator. Because if you get a second term for yourself that you did not win by legitimate electoral means, then yes, you're a dictator who no longer has to submit to elections. You can submit to yourself to the appearance of elections, but once you've succeeded in a coup, you have put yourself beyond the reach of democratic guidelines and democratic rules and regulations. Because, to be clear, fascism is not an ideology. Fascism is a method of harnessing the masses of grievance, of self-pity. It's a strategy to harness that human capacity for turning self-pity into group celebration and group violence directed at minority groups. Once you've found a way, or you've been encouraged to sublimate all your irritation and blame and discontent at others, be they Democrats, vilified Democrats, be they vilified lesbian, gay, transgender people, be they vilified migrants, be they unfairly vilified undocumented migrants. So fascism is a way of eroding the rule of law, eroding democracy, using the power of free speech, using the democratic standard of free speech to air ideas, to give voice to rhetoric that collects, that weaponizes self-pity, whininess, white grievance, a sense of loss of privilege, potency, and turn that into a political rejection, negative partisanship, whereby you have such strong feelings of hatred towards Democrats, towards migrants, you become irrational in your attachment to your hero who explained all this to you, who explained to you, like an abusive partner, don't trust anybody else. Don't trust the media. Don't trust your friends and family, if you have any, who tell you that Trump is a con man and a grifter. Like an abusive partner, they isolate you from all forms of verifiable reality and feed you a stream of lies that has to be constant to continue to preoccupy you away from verifiable reality. A stream of lies and insults and entertainment. And Donald Trump can tell a joke. I saw him tell a joke the other day. I even laughed because his joke was slightly self-deprecating. He told a joke against himself in which he said, "Every time I fly over a blue state, I get a new subpoena." Ha, Donald Trump, that is what happens because you committed so many crimes and you're not in office anymore. You don't have the ability to corruptly choose a US Attorney General who will twist and violate the law in order to hide evidence of your crimes, in order to distort the results of reports on your criminal behavior, your obstruction of justice, your criminal liaising with pandering to foreign governments who, and rewarding of foreign governments who have fought to twist the media environment to favor your chances of being elected, because that's what Putin orchestrated for Donald Trump in 2016. He helped Donald Trump. It's documented. They bought ad revenue. They targeted people on Facebook using what's it called? Is it psychographic? It was targeted information using also geographic locations of people who attend church, so they could be micro-targeted in relation to their interests, specified anxiety hyping things to say, oh, if you're a voter and you care about guns or you're anxious about this, Hillary Clinton's going to take your guns. Donald Trump's going to preserve your ability to own as many guns as you like. So Donald Trump, like a parent assisting a spoiled child, is going to let you keep your inappropriate toys that you've been hurting the neighborhood kids with, or that you're likely to hurt the neighborhood kids with, because high prevalence of guns actually leads to high prevalence of violence against police officers, high prevalence of family violence, high prevalence of street violence, high prevalence of guns being stolen from cars and homes and then used to further criminal activity. States that have loosened their gun laws have all experienced a rise in crime, including a rise in violent crime, as well as property theft. It's just a consequence of unsecured weapons, which is a consequence of weapon proliferation without concomitant regulations that say you have to store your guns securely or you'll experience significant legal consequences. You have to obtain a license. You have to engage in responsible behaviors in the same way you do have to undertake tests and purchase insurance and behave responsibly if you engage in the privilege of owning a car. It's not a right. It's not a God-given opportunity to own a car. You get to own a car if you can pay for one, but also if you can pass a test, a knowledge test, if you can pass a skill test, if you can do all of those things and continue to conform to legal requirements of renewing your license and renewing your car insurance, then you can continue to earn the privilege of car ownership and car usage. But you cannot continue to drive on the streets if you repeatedly break the law. If you store your car unsecurely or you operate your car in a dangerous fashion. So there's a myth of responsible gun ownership in the United States, which is a lot of people are not responsible gun owners. A lot of people's lives would have been saved if Republican states did not pander to the egos and pander to maintain the false constructs of right-wing media by lying to them about the meaning of the Second Amendment, lying to them that they have a God-given right to own a gun or a constitutionally mandated right to own a gun, own as many guns, as many weapons-grade, military-grade powerful weapons as they like. It's God wrote the Constitution and it's in the Constitution. It's not. The Constitution specifies, foregrounded at the beginning of the utterance, a well-regulated militia. And what many American states have, is far from well-regulated. And that's a function of pandering to spoiled voters, spoiled, overindulged Republican voters who believe that they can continue to endanger other people's lives and their own families' lives by collecting caches of weapons that make them feel safe because they anticipate a race war because they cannot bring themselves to terms with American history, cannot acknowledge the ongoing consequences of slavery that have not been adequately dealt with, the ongoing political fallout of slavery, which is the electoral college system, which periodically overturns the results of the popular vote in America in favor of electing a president who's won just the electoral college vote. The failure to acknowledge that is all leftovers from slavery, from pandering to slave owners in the Constitution, to reassure them that they will continue to have the right to protect themselves from the consequences of anti-slavery voters who might vote not only to end slavery, but to redress some of the injustice by paying some of the unpaid wages. That's what we should refer to reparations as, paying some of the unpaid wages, not to those people who were directly deprived of liberty and income and freedom and family unity, not the people who were tortured and hounded and forced to live without freedom for their entire lives and had their children. Anyway, not those people, but even their descendants who have continued to experience fallout from the inherited attitudes of people whose hierarchical thinking led them to defend the entire system of chattel slavery, the entire system of immoral profiteering at the expense of humans who originated from from a different place on the globe, humans who were then born and raised in America, but did not have the privileges accorded to those who had white skin in the United States. A system of hierarchical ordering based on the exploitability of an easily recognizable way to differentiate between arbitrary groups of people. You look black, maybe you have one drop of genetic blackness in your bloodstream, you must be exploited by me. Anyway, I just want people to remember that. I want people to remember very much that the Constitution has not been changed since that time, that if an injustice was part of the founding of the Constitution of the United States, it is time to at least begin the process of acknowledging it, let alone because acknowledging something, admitting something and facing it, having the courage to face that part of the Constitution, that immoral conciliatory gesture that was made then, that has the repercussion even now still of privileging white rural conservative voters over voters in cities, over voters in urban areas, with the consequence of having elected a traitor, miscreant, thief, saboteur of American national security, Donald Trump, in 2016, over the actual winner of the popular vote. That's the standard democratic way that people win elections in normal functional democracies. The winner of the popular vote wins the election. But in America, that anachronism, that after effect of a concession made to slave owners continues to operate to sabotage American national security in favor of pandering to the descendants and the inheritors of pro-slavery people. Let's listen to, I've got to go soon, but let's just quickly listen to Mitch McConnell condemn Donald Trump.
January 6th was a disgrace. American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try to stop a specific piece of domestic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth.
Yep, falsehoods.
Because he was angry he'd lost an election.
Well,
there's no question. None. That President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it.
You know what I have to do? This is great. Yes, there's no question. Donald Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. But there's also a quote from Mitch McConnell, which is very revelatory about his motivations in doing that, in being so honest about Donald Trump's role that day. He condemned Trump, but then he didn't vote on an impeachment. He said, initially, if this isn't impeachable, I don't know what is. But, and he also just days after the insurrection said, the Democrats are going to take care of the son of a bitch for us. Now, what does that mean? That means they're going to get rid of Donald Trump. They're going to render him politically out of running, politically impotent for us, meaning we don't have to be visibly responsible for Donald Trump's removal from the political arena. So we won't be punished by voters who are still inexplicably, but explicably, if you know how fascism works, attached to Donald Trump. They're a white supremacy champion. They're a preserver of what they think is a wholesome way of life, but really they just fear the disruption of being, they fear DEI, you know, all of the anti-CRT things, anti-critical race theory, and DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. The people who are loudest in opposition to that are those people who've inherited the hierarchical thinking of slave owners. They are people who think they have inherent worth for being white, or they have not even inherent worth, because that sounds nice. Oh, that's nice for everybody to believe that they're inherently worthy, that Jesus loves them, so they're worthy, or any reason that they can think of. It's nice to be able to give yourself a little boost in your life to motivate you to do good things and get things done because you're worthy. Humans have big brains capable of a lot of imagination, feats of imagination, but a lot of fearful imaginings as well. So yes, it's great to be able to boost yourself, but for Donald Trump to give people the idea that they are worthy inherently because of whiteness, it's not, in hierarchical terms, it's not just worthy, it's worthy to get special privileges, worthy to receive FEMA help, to get federal aid, and then projects which try to promote equity, projects which try and say, well, let's make sure we're not just stealing from Black taxpayers, but that their children also get to benefit from good schools. The same type of resources that we give to schools where the students are predominantly white. Let's make an effort to do this because we have to acknowledge that we often reflexively funnel resources towards white children and white adults. And that continues on today. There are studies that have shown that white people in America are more likely to get the lion's share of help from FEMA, disproportionate to their numbers. There's just a baked-in tendency to act favorably towards white people. And without knowing that, without admitting that tendency, without taking an interest, without being awake to that circumstance, then of course efforts to promote equity and diversity and inclusion all seem unfair to you. Maybe they're taking the status quo from you, or maybe you just, because you don't admit that there has been any favoring of white people in the first place, because you have been fed a diet of false history, because the deceit of withholding information from you has been practiced so prevalently, you might not know about all of the, hey, Christopher, you might not know about all of the many instances in which there have been white-led massacres of Black business districts or Black house, because it's not just the Black Wall Street area that was the target of a white riot. There have been others, multiple in American history. So if you don't have an understanding, if your history books have not informed you and you have not been lucky enough to attend a college class that was honest with you, and all of the, oh, we have to keep things nice and innocent for the children to not upset them, has neglected to inform you of this significant tendency in American history for white people to lash out when they became too aggrieved at seeing their own hierarchical worldview challenged by reality. They challenged by the mere existence of Black prosperity and Black excellence. For that to be so upsetting and so dissonant with a worldview in which white people are ordained by God to rule over others and to receive good things and to be blessed by the unpaid for labor of others, to be a benevolent owner of other human beings. If you can't admit that white people have not only done that, but justified that and passed on that paradigm of thinking of that religious and just also even a secular logic of white superiority, of falsely confected white superiority, then it won't never sit well with you to see schools teach Black history and make an effort to include celebrated Black scientists and Black artists and athletes in a special history month. It will always feel wrong to you. Why are they being specially chosen for inclusion? Because of our history of excluding Black excellence, a history of excluding truthful Black history because it was jarring, because it was dissonant. This is a good speech. I should write it down. I should do it again sometime in a more polished fashion. This has all been off the cuff. I'm doing it in honor of Trump Arraignment Day, whereby the champion of white supremacy has finally crimed too hard and too long and too dangerously to completely escape consequences anymore. And the American legal system has managed to find a way forwards to stand up to his fascist tendencies, to use his supporters' irrational devotion and tendency towards violence at his say-so. After he incited the violence of January the 6th, he is trying, as we speak, to incite violence against Special Prosecutor Jack Smith and his wife and family and anybody involved in the operation, the fair and functional operation of the law against someone who, by their own admission, thinks it's their boxes, that they have every right to take whatever documents they want from their term in office home with them, store it whatever they like, pretend to have declassified it with their mind, pretend to not be subject to the laws governing declassification, the laws stipulating what processes must be followed before top secret documents could ever be declassified. Because once you declassify a top secret document, then the Washington Post, the New York Times can put in a Freedom of Information request. They can request to see any declassified documents. If you need something to be kept secret, you leave it classified. So for those making the arguments that Donald Trump is preserved from legal requirements and moral requirements to leave America's top secret documents in safe hands where they are governed by rules of storage and rules of who has clearance to view classified information. For all those people who want to keep arguing that their white champion is not subject to the rule of law, and that we should somehow cry and feel sad that Donald Trump is meeting some consequences, even if they've been delayed, even if they're relatively weaker than the force and immediacy of the consequences that you or I would experience if we stole 100th, 1,000th of the top secret documents that Trump has stolen by virtue of his initial access that he had legally as president, elected president, but that he no longer legally had once leaving office. He did not have access to take those documents. He did not have the legal right to take those documents. He didn't even have the legal right to take some of those documents out of the special compartmented rooms in which he initially viewed them, because they were top secret. And if you have a document that attracts that designation, it shouldn't leave the room. It shouldn't leave the special compartment. So I told everybody all this, but now I have to leave. It's been a pleasure. I hope some people have enjoyed it. We heard Mitch McConnell denounce Donald Trump and say that he is practically and morally responsible for the events of January the 6th, that he incited that mob for the purpose of overthrowing the government of the United States because he did not like winning. Well, it was more than Donald Trump didn't like losing. Donald Trump had a plot to install himself as an unelected dictator. And the more honestly we can talk about that, the better. Christopher got here at the right time for a speech. Yes, well, all of the history that people often saying on Twitter, I was never taught about this in school. The Rosewood Massacre, the Tulsa Massacre. You weren't told it because it was part of a pattern of denial, white denialism, to preserve the myth of white heroism and white benevolence. Hasn't been benevolent. Humans aren't always benevolent. And when humans get proven wrong about things or proven to have acted badly and selfishly, there's a potent power of denialism that can come into play. And it takes courage to push back against that denialism. We have two elements operating here. We need white people to be more courageous and revoke that practice of denying real history. We can be a bit more honest. We don't have to wear a sackcloth and ashes. The reason why we have to be honest is so we stop perpetuating the fallout of those massacres, the fallout of that hierarchical thinking of white benevolence being ordained by God or just by hierarchical logic that we should rule, we should exploit, we should benefit from treating other people badly. And therefore we should reject efforts to pay appropriate recompense to the descendants of slaves, the unpaid wages of slavery, the unpaid share of taxes to people whose children were excluded from well-resourced schools, children who were made to cross flooded roads, to sit in schools that didn't have heating or textbooks, or any of the privileges that were awarded to schools with white children in them by the government, that the government perpetuated this practice of channeling resources to only its white citizens and completely underfunded and delivered to its citizens with skin of darker hue. That's I gotta leave. Thank you so much. Bye, Christopher, and bye anyone who watches this video on a replay. Take care. All the best, and happy Trump arraignment day. Happy Wheels of Justice turning day. Oh.